to Direction Northeast. Hello, I'm Abby Hathorn. This program is a presentation of the Communications Department of Northeast State Community College. What would it be like to take a course for a college credit and still be in high school? In this episode of Direction Northeast, we'll look at the process of dual enrollment and how it significantly is raising student success. Join us with our guests, Dr. John Grubb and Shelby McKenzie, after this.
My name is Ann Rowell. I'm an actress, and I got my start at Northeast State Community College. Just as acting truly allows me to express myself and learn new things about myself, my whole experience at Northeast State has allowed me to do that. I've found new interests, new hobbies, new passions that I would have never known had I not come here. Northeast State gave me a quality education, amazing friendships, but most importantly, it allowed me to discover who I want to be.
Our first guest is Dr. John Grubb, whose dissertation examined dual enrollment and student success. His 5-year study includes dual enrollment statistics demonstrating how this program promotes a higher college completion rate. Our second guest is Shelby McKenzie, an administrator at Northeast State who works on a day-to-day basis with dual enrollment students. Hi, John and Shelby. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
My first question will be for Shelby, and just to kind of get things rolling, what is dual enrollment for someone who doesn't know?
Well, I work in the University Parallel Dual Enrollment Office, so I work with students who specifically want to take classes like Composition 1 and Composition 2, and these are high school students that basically want to get a head start on their college curriculum. A lot of our students take classes at their high school, so they take Northeast State classes at their high schools, and then we also have a lot of students that actually come to Northeast State locations and receive instruction. So these students are not only getting college credit, but they're also getting high school credit at the same time.
How does dual enrollment work at Northeast State?
Well, we're in 16 area high schools, and the really unique thing about our program is that we send Northeast State instructors into the high schools. So these students receive college instruction during their regular high school day. They don't have to leave their high school. We come to them. Northeast State goes to them, which is very, very exciting. We also have students that actually come to Northeast State locations, and that's primarily homeschool students that maybe need to get, say, an English credit to satisfy high school requirements. They'll come to Northeast State, maybe they'll take Comp 1, and that satisfies not only high school requirements, but also high school requirements, college and high school.
Now, John, my next question will be for you. With your dissertation on dual enrollment, you kind of set out to try to make dual enrollment look bad, but what made you go with that approach?
Well, in so much of the literature for dual enrollment, particularly before 2008 or so, they would just take the dual enrollment students and the students that didn't take dual enrollment and compare them directly to each other. And that made dual enrollment look like a miracle drug because the dual enrollment students, the ones who tend to take dual enrollment, already have a good GPA. They're already involved in their school, they're engaged, they have higher ACT scores, their parents have more education. And so it's really not a fair comparison to just directly put them together as two groups against each other. So what I did was I framed my study in a way that would make it more difficult for dual enrollment to look good.
What did this help you prove?
Well, it helped me prove that dual enrollment has a real success when you're comparing apples to apples in your study. For instance, dual enrollment students are almost 4 times less likely to need remediation. And a few years ago, the statistic was that about 70% of our incoming freshmen might need at least one remedial course. So to have none is a big deal, and that's a benefit that follows the student through college because that means they earn more credits early on. Because they're prepared, they earn a little higher GPA, and then that gets them to completion sooner.
Now, Shelby, how can students at Northeast State or at area high schools get involved with dual enrollment?
Well, the first step is to either contact their high school counselor or they can contact the University Parallel Dual Enrollment Office. There is an application process just like for a regular regular college student. We do look at ACT scores to determine eligibility into the program. Students have to take the ACT, and they need at least an 18 in English, a 19 in reading, and a 19 in math to take most of our courses. And then, of course, if they don't have those scores, we'll let them take the challenge test, the compass test. And then they meet with someone in our office, either myself or my supervisor, Gwen Widener. And at that point, we pick out classes, we set up their schedule, and we are basically their advisors at that point.
And what grade do students typically start the whole dual enrollment process?
Most students start taking dual enrollment courses as a junior. That's when actually they can start using their grant money, the dual enrollment grant. It's eligible for juniors and seniors. And that's typically when students start. Some students may only take classes as a senior though.
Now, John, when you were talking to you yesterday about how the federal government is investing money in dual enrollment, what is your thoughts on that?
Well, there's an experiment that's going to happen next year. The federal government is going to allow 10,000 students to fill out a financial aid form for student assistance, and they'll use about 10,000 students as an experiment using Pell money that normally isn't available until you're on the ground at college attending, to fund dual enrollment students and see how that plays out. I think it's going to be a big win for dual enrollment.
Now, Shelby, what are your feelings on that topic?
Well, that is, like John said, it's a pilot program, so it's not going to probably be something that every student in dual enrollment can participate in, and I think it's also going to be narrowed down to certain colleges. You have to apply to it. But if it's successful and it works out, it could make our numbers go way, way up, which is very exciting. It could really increase access for dual enrollment students that maybe in the past couldn't afford to take them, so that's exciting.
Now, John, who is the typical dual enrolled student?
The typical dual enrolled student is usually female, usually white, from an affluent family, so they're not always eligible for full Pell. They have higher ACT scores, higher high school GPAs, and they're typically university bound. They're not coming to a community college. 75–80% of dual enrollment students go to a four-year school right off the bat.
Why do you think that is the situation with dual enrollment?
Part of it is that that schools with higher amounts of minorities, and I'm not talking about schools in this area, but in other parts of the country, aren't as well funded. And so they don't have advanced topics in the high school, they don't have dual enrollment in there. But it also adversely affects students in very rural areas. So your chance of taking dual enrollment is related to how close your high school is to a college.
Right. Now, Shelby, how long has dual enrollment been around?
Well, dual enrollment at Northeast State has been around since at least the late 1990s. I've been here in the dual enrollment office since 2011, but it's been around a lot longer than I've been here.
What are the pros for dual enrollment, especially at Northeast State?
Well, of course, the biggest reason to take dual enrollment classes is that it allows you to make progress towards your degree. If you can knock out Comp 1 and Comp 2 and psychology and classes that basically no matter what you major in or where you go to school, you're going to have to take these classes, it helps you get a jump start, which is huge. And I think the other positive benefits to dual enrollment really just involves having that college experience. These students learn how to use D2L, right? They learn how to communicate with an instructor. They learn how college is different from high school because it is very different. They learn how to write college papers. They learn what this college experience is about, but generally they're still in high school, so there's sort of still a safe place to navigate all of this, which is good. It's positive.
Now, are there any cons to dual enrollment?
Well, there is. Usually you have to pay for it. There is some sort of gap fee that you have to pay. So I guess if there had to be a con, maybe it would be that. But overall, this is an extremely positive thing that high school students can do while they're still in high school to make progress in college.
Now, one other question would be, you talk about how dual enrollment kind of comes to you if it's available at your school or your location. Is in this particular area, is it available for kids who go to public school, private school, and that are homeschooled?
Yes, we are in 16 area high schools. So we send Northeast State instructors to 16 high schools in the area. So students at those high schools can receive instruction. Homeschool students typically are going to come to our campuses to receive instruction, so it's available to anyone that's in high school.
Now, John, is there a higher completion rate for students who are involved with dual enrollment?
Absolutely. I looked at finishing college in 2 years and finishing college in 3 years. You typically think of a 2-year school as being completed in 2 years, but most students don't complete in 2 years. When I compared the students that took dual enrollment to those that didn't, the dual enrollment students were about 2.5 times more likely to finish in 2 years, which was phenomenal. And should excite the state of Tennessee a great bit and to even further invest in dual enrollment. The state has done a marvelous job with the grant. And then you go on out to the 3-year mark and you think, well, this is where most people are going to graduate or they're not going to make it. The dual enrollment students are still 1.7 times more likely to finish at 3 years.
That's amazing. Why do you think that dual enrollment has sort of enhanced or made these kids more motivated to finish their educations?
That's a great question. I think part of it is what Shelby was saying about having that college experience. You get more rigor, you get the expectations for communication, for being proactive, those sorts of things. You take on that identity of being a college student. And the other side of it are things that are hard to measure, like family, how your family values education, how they've invested in you with other kinds of opportunities for volunteering or being involved in community activities or the arts. So there's some unmeasurable to it.
Now, Shelby, is there a reason why this particular program, how it enhances students? You're taking college classes at the very beginning of high school and things like that. How does that sort of affect their whole college experience and finishing early and things like that?
Well, of course, they're making progress on their degree because they're getting some of these classes out of the way. So that's only going to help them finish on time or maybe even early. And like I said earlier, having those skills that just comes with being in college, they're learning those sort of ahead of time, as opposed to a lot of our students when they get on campus when they're 18 or 19, they're just now learning how to use D2L or how college is different from high school. How to write college papers, where to get help on campus if they need something. Whereas these students have known the answers to those questions since they were 16 or 17. So they get that little bit of head start that I think motivates them to complete their work and to finish on time.
Now, John, do you think that shortening this time in college is beneficial, or do you think it's a little bit negative towards their futures?
Oh no, I think it's a great positive. The matter of the fact is there's always a limit to the amount of time that you can spend in college, because sooner or later life is going to happen to you. And we don't want life to happen to people before they get out of college. And the other constraint is particularly for those students that have a Pell Grant or a scholarship of some sort. There's a time limit to college. And so you don't want to think of college as a free end experiment. And as the state has moved towards a completion agenda, they've begun to fund the universities and the colleges based not just on how many students they get in, but also how many students they get out and whether or not they finish on time. On time usually being an extra year. Mm-hmm. But nevertheless, they're thinking in terms of economic development and workforce development for the state, which is a great, smart way to do. Governor Haslam's Drive to 55 program has really changed the way that higher education is beginning to look at the students.
Now, because dual enrollment is so beneficial to students and their future and getting out there and getting their education actually completed, do you think that dual enrollment should be a requirement for all students?
I think it would be great if the students that are ready, the students that test ready in 11th grade particularly, but perhaps even in a younger grade, I don't know. So there's some debate over whether or not a freshman could ever be ready for the freshman English of college. But if they're ready for it academically, I think building that pipeline and including all the students and getting those fees covered some way through a scholarship, through a grant, so that the course is free to the student, I see that as nothing but a positive for the public as we're looking to ramp up, the education of the entire population.
Oh, absolutely. Now, Shelby, in your experience with working with kids who are wanting to start dual enrollment or even dual enrolled, why would you say that most of the kids want to dual enroll? What's the drive that pushes them?
Most of the students that are currently in the dual enrollment program are extremely driven. They have plans. They are planners by nature. They want to graduate, and they're going to go to this college, and they're going to go get their master's degree, and then they're going to, begin this profession. They have these benchmarks that they want to meet. So these generally are our most motivated students. So I think that that's why we see these types of students in the program, because they have plans, and they also have parents at home that are pushing them and motivating and encouraging them as well to make a head start on those plans.
Would you say that that's one of the biggest things that makes dual enrollment successful versus it kind of falling off the side?
I think so. I think the reason that our program is so successful in general is because our office provides a really great amount of support. We look at these students as our customers in a way, and we want them to have a good experience. And I think that's why our program is so successful. And then, of course, the marvelous instruction that they receive from our instructors. That's what keeps people coming back.
And I'd like to add in there that in a study from 2006 to 2009 from the Tennessee Higher Education Commission, 99% of the students who took advantage of the dual enrollment grant had at least one parent with at least an associate's degree.
Oh, absolutely. I could see where that would make a difference. What is the biggest problem in assessing dual enrollment for who it betters?
Well, in what I did with my study, I controlled for the differences between the groups. So trying to take that question off the table, it's true that the better students benefit, but the literature also shows that everybody benefits, regardless of race, gender, socioeconomic class. If they take dual enrollment, they benefit from it.
Oh, absolutely. So what would you say is sort of the hardest thing that you had to deal with researching dual enrollment for your dissertation?
Well, it was learning to control for those very differences, which I was glad to get to do, but it did require me to learn a specific kind of software and to learn how to run the procedures for it. So that was the challenge up front. But I can say that's the hardest part because I was so well supported by the Research Analytics and Planning Department here at Northeast State, because they did a great job of finding out what I needed, talking me through the details of the data, and then getting it to me in a very timely fashion.
Now, Shelby, what would you say is the rate of students that are dual enrolled prior to either attending Northeast State, or do they take strictly from Northeast State and then come here? What's kind of the rate of people with that?
Well, just in general, in the University Parallel Dual Enrollment Office, we have anywhere from 500 to 600 students each semester. We don't really keep track of who comes here or who may go to ETSU, but in general, that's about how many students we have each semester. From fall to spring, some of those students could be returning, so we may not necessarily count them in that count, but we have a very large program.
Would you say that most colleges promote their dual enrollment programs highly, or is it something that it just kind of comes and goes with colleges?
Well, in the state of Tennessee right now, dual enrollment is counted as part of our funding. So it's a huge program for a lot of colleges, particularly community colleges.
Now, John, you look like you want to say something.
Well, on your question about how many students come here, in my study, which covered 5 cohort years, they finish high school, they come by the fall semester and enroll. We had, for those that finished that first semester, all right, so we're looking at students that didn't drop out immediately, there were 1,232 first-time, full-time coming out of the public high schools to here over that 5-year period that were able to make it through that first semester. And 246 of those were dual enrollment students.
Now, John, on the topic of GPA, because as a college student, everybody knows that your GPA either makes or breaks you.
Yeah.
How does dual enrollment affect students with GPAs versus students that are not in dual enrolled?
Early in college, there's a benefit, and it's a very important benefit. It's about 1/4 point, but the average dual enrollment student is just above a 3.0, and the average non-dual enrollment, the ones that didn't take dual enrollment, are just below a 3.0, and that can sometimes be a very important marker for getting into certain programs. So it's about 1/4 point early on. It disappears because what happens is the students that aren't doing well are leaving the college. And so by the time you get to completion, there's no significant difference between dual enrollment and those that didn't take dual enrollment.
So would you say there's a lower dropout rate for students that start dual enrollment in high school versus those who don't?
Absolutely, yes. Even just looking in one of the questions that I answered was how many make it back for the second year. There was about 78% of the dual enrollment students made it back, about 73% of the non-dual enrollment students. So that's about 50 extra students that dropped out that we might have been able to keep if they had been in dual enrollment.
Now, I asked Shelby earlier, what are the pros and cons of dual enrollment? But in your opinion and through the research that you've done, what are some of the pros and cons of dual enrollment?
I'm not a big believer in cons at this moment. I've crunched a lot of numbers and looked at it really hard and tried my best to make it not look great in my research. And I'm sold. I am sold on it. The benefits are that you don't need remediation. You're far less likely to need remediation. I think 9 students out of 246 over 5 years, just 9 needed some kind of remediation. That's pretty stellar. And then you have an extra credit earned that first semester. But a lot of times when you get to the end of your second year or maybe that 5th semester, you need one more class to finish. You know, that credit advantage can really play out well at the end of your college career. As far as the completion rates, we've already talked about 2.5 times more likely at 2 years, 1.7 times more likely at 3 years. So I think it's all sunshine and roses as far as I can tell.
Now, why do you think it is that dual enrollment sort of motivates kids, whether they have that extra motivation at home or not, it motivates them to complete more education than those who would not be?
I think part of it is going back to the experience, the expectations. If you come from a background where there isn't as much education, but you do wind up taking dual enrollment, your parents support you in it, then you don't finish high school as just saying, I'm a high school graduate. You've already got college credits in your pocket, so you can say, I am a college student.
So it essentially teaches students how to handle that stress of college before it actually hits them full on.
Oh yes, yes.
Now, Shelby, in your experience with working with all these kids who are dual enrolled, what would you say is one of the factors that maybe make some of them kind of go, I don't know if I want to do this, or I definitely want to do this?
Well, again, I think that the students that are very, very pro dual enrollment are just your motivated students that want to get that head start. Some students that may choose not to do dual enrollment may not want to put in that extra work because it is a college class. And of course, you know, that the financial cost that is often associated with these classes can be a barrier. But I think that all of our parents and almost all of our students would agree that the financial cost that can be associated with these classes is worth it. Not only because you're making progress on your degree, but because of that experience, just the overall experience of being exposed to college.
Now, if someone's watching this right now is going, you know what, I want to be dual enrolled, what are some things that they need to know before they even fill out that application?
They need to take the ACT. This year we're sort of in a transition year with the dual enrollment grant that the state of Tennessee provides. This year for our juniors, their first 2 dual enrollment classes are free as long as they've lived in Tennessee for the last year and as long as they meet the other HOPE eligibility requirements, either having a 21 composite on the ACT or 3.0 high school GPA. This year for our seniors, it's a little bit different. They get $300 of grant money for one course if they've lived in Tennessee for the last year, and an additional $300 in grant money if they've got that 21 on the ACT or a 3.0 high school GPA. So for our seniors this year, if they take 2 classes, the out-of-pocket cost is around $400 for tuition, which is still a steal in my opinion. And they also have to buy their textbooks. But next year, for any students that are watching for next year, juniors or seniors next year, your first 2 dual enrollment classes will be free if you meet those eligibility requirements. So that's very exciting. Even if students just want to get their feet wet and they just want to take Comp 1 and Comp 2, it's going to be free next year if it's their first 2 classes and they meet those eligibility requirements.
Now, does dual enrollment limit students to taking only core classes like English Comp 1, American Literature, or does it allow them to sort of explore majors and fields like that?
We generally encourage students to take general ed core classes because these are classes that are part of all of our majors. That way, if they maybe go in thinking they're going to be a history major and they decide they're going to go into pre-health, well, Comp 1 is part of both of those majors, so they're not out anything, you know what I mean? So that's generally what we encourage students to do in dual enrollment.
Now, John, would you say that doing dual enrollment with taking a lot of that core and things like that, does it help students better figure out what they want to major in so they don't have to spend as much time worrying about that whenever they actually get into an institution?
Well, that's a great question. That really didn't fall within what I studied, but I think it helps them adopt the identity of belonging at college, which is half of the battle. When you show up and you don't feel like you belong, you don't feel like you fit in, you don't feel like you're really supposed to be there, that's a hard thing to overcome. But as far as picking out a major, it seems that the dual enrollment students do, for some reason, already have a plan, as Shelby said.
I would think they would have to.
And a lot of that, I guess, we have to credit mom and dad for.
Absolutely.
So, but nonetheless, it gives them another person to talk to, another person to look up to, another person to ask about careers, because they're looking at a college instructor and they're able to talk with them about their experiences.
And I'll also add this, these students can use any of the services on campus. So a lot of these students will go to career services and take different assessments, and they may find out where their interests fall in terms of a career. So a lot of our dual enrollment students will take advantage of that as well if they're not quite sure.
Now, as a dual enrolled student, do they get to, do they deal with a student counselor like at their school and an advisor as well?
Yes, some students will still work with their high school counselor when they're navigating this process, but for the most part, they primarily work with our office. We are financial aid to them, we're the business office to them, we're admissions, we're their advisors. We're kind of a one-stop shop for these students.
Oh, thank you so much, John and Shelby, for joining me today. Thank you. We'll be back in just a moment to wrap up Direction Northeast.
Our family gets together nearly every weekend. We laugh together, we enjoy each other, we have quality time together, and Northeast State has afforded us those opportunities. I'm a graduate of Northeast State, and my husband's a graduate of Northeast State, and both of our children chose to go to Northeast State. And I think it's because it provided us with an affordable, quality education, and it was a wonderful experience. I'm Susan Graybill, and our whole family got our start at Northeast State.
That concludes the program for today. We have talked with guests Dr. John Grubb and Shelby McKenzie on the dual enrollment program and its benefits. Community is very important to the students at Northeast State Community College, and this program takes a look at a few of the subjects they find important. Until we meet next time, on behalf of the students, staff, and faculty of Northeast State Community College, I'm Abby Hathorn, and this is Direction Northeast.